in chapter 31 of Tisa, in many ways, is a loose repetition of the first chapter of the Bible. And you'll know from mine and Sherry's teaching, we see this a great deal, the interreferential nature of the Bible. So what do we have in the beginning of chapter 31, Exodus 31? We have God calling out Bezalel, and as I explained in my Shabbat thought, Bezalel breaks down into Bezal, shadow or image, El, in the shadow image of God. And therefore we have here a reference to the original human beings who are created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. So Bezalel is actually given the name that is referred to them. By the way, they only gained the names in chapters 2 and 3. Adam is called Adam in Genesis chapter 2, and Eve is only called Eve at the end of 3 or the beginning of 4. I don't recall exactly which. And it says here that God, 31:3, that God has filled Bezalel with godly spirit, Ruach Elohim. You may remember the Ruach Elohim, Merachefet al Panei Hom, the Ruach of the divine hovering over the face of the deep. It says he's filled him, Va'amale oto, Bechochma, with wisdom, Tivuna, discernment or understanding, Uveda'at, knowledge. Of course, this takes us back to Eitz Hadat Tov Ra, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This seems to be either connected to or some kind of different da'at. It's not the knowledge of good and evil, unless that is somehow connected with the knowledge of beauty, because that is what Bezalel has the expertise in, is to take these ideas and render them into a beautiful form. And then it says, Bechol melacha, in all toil. At the end of the first chapter of Genesis, makes us known that we don't do any melacha on Shabbat, any toil on Shabbat. And then it goes on and says, lachshov machshavot. Now, the Hebrew terms lachshov machshavot literally means to think thoughts, but the origins of the Hebrew word lachshov machshavot probably means to weave. And it's interesting that as the Hebrew language developed and they were trying to come up with a word for thought, they used the same word as to weave. So you'll find the idea of thinking already over in Chronicles, which is then retrojected back to earlier parts of the Bible. But in earlier parts of the Bible, the word lachshov has the sense of weaving, and we can see the brilliance in taking the term weaving to describe human thought. It says, Uvacharoshet Evin, the carving of stones, Limelot, and Uvacharoshet Eitz, and the carving of trees. So here we have all of these natural elements in the Garden of Eden. For example, the tree, the stones, etc. They will now be lacharosh, which means to carve them. Uvachol melacha. So Bezalel is the one who is skilled using Chokhmah, Tivuna, and Da'at to take what you might call the elements of the Garden of Eden and create with them something beautiful, but will also be a place to house the divine. Now, I want to read one little section from Job and then bring this back to our portion. In our Midrash for today, the Midrash is of two minds. One part of the Midrash today is God showing to Adam all of the different people whom God will choose to serve God. And what you get from reading that part of the Midrash is a sense of destiny, is that God has already chosen all of those who will serve God. On the other hand, there is a Midrash that says God doesn't know whom God specifically is going to choose. In fact, God goes looking for the unique person who can take these divine thoughts that God has given to Moshe and find the exact right person who can render these thoughts into our world. So if you'd like to go with me, you can see this extraordinary verse from the book of Job. You're going to have to jump all the way over to Job chapter 28, verse 12. Job chapter 28, verse 12. Well, where is the book of Job? You have to go to the third part of the Bible called the writings. You have the Psalms, you have the Proverbs, and then you have the book of Job. After the book of Job come the 5 scrolls. So if you're looking, Psalms, Proverbs, Job. Job is a very long book, very interesting, fascinating book. We've taught it a few times. We'll teach it again. But look in Job chapter 12. It's a fascinating chapter. It says here, this is Job's praise of wisdom. Job says, "V'ha chokhmah me'ayin timatzeh." He says, wisdom me'ayin timatzeh, from nothingness does it come. By the way, the Kabbalists love this because in the Kabbalah, ayin is one of the names of the highest sphira, sometimes called keter, sometimes called machshava, sometimes called ayin, pure nothingness, sometimes called the Ein Sof. The next sphira, as most of you know, is called chokhmah. So the Kabbalists make this a play on words. It says, me'ayin v'chokhmah, me'ayin timatzeh, chokhmah, from where does it come? It comes from the first sphira, ayin, goes down to chokhmah. We're going to put that aside. That's a Kabbalistic play. But the question here is, where does it come from? Why are some people philosophically wise? They're not philosophically wise because they read books of philosophy. They read books of philosophy because they're already wise. When I think of the wisdom of Plato and Aristotle, they didn't read and then one day become wise. They wrote because they had something called chokhmah, as there was some part of their character that the divine spirit had endowed them with. So this idea of what is the quality of chokhmah, which at some level means at the lowest level you might say, the technical ability to render thought into beauty. The technical ability to render thought into beauty, and then as the word goes on and on, it turns into the realm of a mystical apprehension. For example, the idea of the chokhmah shel mala, the upper wisdom. So you have this idea of the chokhmah throughout Greco-Roman, Jewish thought, Stoic thought, all throughout the philosophy prior to Christianity. And then it becomes a core part of the thought of the church fathers all the way through the history of Christianity. So it goes on in Job chapter 28. Humankind does not know its worth. It cannot be found in the land of the living. I'm still in Job 28. The depth says, it's not in me. And the sea says, it's not with me. Precious gold cannot be exchanged for it. Its price cannot be weighed in silver. You can't buy wisdom for any price. You're not going to find it at the bottom of the sea. You're not going to find it in the depths of the earth. It cannot be compared to Ophir gold, to precious shoham or sapphire. Gold and glass cannot approximate it, nor can exchange be in golden articles. Corals and crystals cannot be considered. The pursuit of wisdom is more precious than pearls. The pitdah, a precious stone of Cush, cannot approximate it. The purest gold cannot be compared to it. Wisdom, from where does it come? Which is the place of understanding? V'ha chokhmah me'ayin tavo, ve'eze makom binah. It is hidden from the eyes of all living things and concealed from the bird of heaven. Doom and death say, with our ears we have heard of its reputation. Only God understands its way. Only God knows its place. For God peers to the ends of the world. God sees what is under the entire heavens, making a prescribed weight for the wind, apportioning water with a measure. When God makes a set allotment for the rain and a path for the clouds of thunder. Then he looked and recorded it. He prepared it and perfected it. And then God said to man, behold, the awe of Adonai is wisdom, and refraining from evil is understanding it. Now, what does the Midrash do? The Midrash takes Job chapter 28, verse 27. I'll go over to the Hebrew for just a moment. And it says, Azra'ah, and then God saw. V'yesapra, and recounted or told. Hechina, and prepared. V'gam hakara, and also investigated deeply. Now, this is a wonderful verse that the rabbis love. One meaning of this verse for the ancient rabbis is this. Whenever God was about to speak Torah, God revised it 4 times. This is in our Torah portion. Every time God was about to speak Torah, God rethought it and rethought it and rethought. We don't know what the original version was. We don't know the edits, the drafts, what's on the cutting floor. But it says, when it says God ra'ah, God saw what God was going to say, vayesapra, and told it and found it lacking. Hechina, prepared it over again. V'gam hakara, and investigated it deeply. And only then did God speak. That's one of the beautiful interpretations in our Midrash today. The other interpretation is how God found Bezalel. One part of the Midrash is Bezalel was there before creation. Everybody was set out in destiny. It says that God would not have created the world had God not known that there would be Torah and there would be people to receive Torah, and that Bezalel would be there able to render God's thoughts into the physical world. Another tradition is that God didn't know, that God had no idea who would be doing this. And at this point in history, it says, Va'azra'ah, God looked, meaning God looked around at all the people and said, I don't know which one of them is qualified. Vayisapra, and recounted or told or counted. I can make a nice drash here because the word Vayisapra is also the root of the sapphire. If Sherry and I want to go there, we can go back to Exodus chapter 24, where God is presented on brickwork of sapphire. That's the first revelation in Exodus 24. So I think there's something here about the idea that God was looking who stood upon sapphire, who had skills with sapphires. There's a very deep mystical connection between God's presence and sapphires. Hechina, prepared him, vegam hakara, and investigated deeply into the soul of Bezalel. Hakara, lachkor, is to investigate deeply. God had to know who was this person to whom God would entrust the building of the Midrash. And then the book of Job seems to respond to itself and say, God said to man, behold, it says, the fear of the Lord is wisdom. Of course, the Hebrew is yirat, which means awe. What is the core of wisdom? Awe, A-W-E. The deeper the awe, the deeper the wisdom. It goes back to my talk last night. What it means to go deep, deep, deep inside and experience the God beyond God through this sense of awe. And with that, what does one know? Sur mera bina. What is bina? If you have awe, then separate yourself from evil. That's the first thing. Once you have that awe, don't think and do destructive things with that awe. Now, of course, after this, we have the recitation of the Sabbath. The stones are put together, and you finish chapter 31. I got to tell you, you finish chapter 31 on such a high. It's like finishing Genesis chapter 1. Everything in its order. Bezalel, the prototype, the prototypical human being, is all set up to go. The people have been given the Sabbath. The tablets are all there. And everything is ready for perfection and redemption. I'll just say a couple of things as far as why the human being was created. I love the Kabbalistic answer is that the human being comes into being because of the tragedy of divine brokenness when the as it were, the vessels shatter. And as the vessels shatter, they fall into a lower realm. The lower realm is both created and is the place where the vessels shatter. And in that lower realm is where the human being comes into creation. So this is a strange idea that we are there, as it were, to receive the aspects of the divine that have been released with the breaking. You might say the as it were, the evil or the disruptive within divine that was held in perfect stasis with the Ein Sof, now has been released and descends, and we are the ones that carry the breakage of God. So I remember when I first began studying the Kabbalah, there is, as it were, no reason to create the human being. We are the result of a divine tragedy, and we carry the breakage. That was enough for me. It's just a fact. We carry the breakage of God, and now what are we going to do with it? What will we do with the breakage of God? So in our relationships, we experience the breakage of God. In our own life journeys, we experience the breakage of God. We look through history, we see the breakage of the divine. When it comes down to this parsha, I just want to point out a couple of things. When Sharon and I both described Exodus chapter 31 with Bezalel and the Shabbos and how it goes back to Genesis, and everything is great. And then it comes to the next part where they reject. You know, this reminded me of you as you were talking, Sherry, is my many years working at a 12-step recovery center. I want to take this at just two very brief angles. That you might say, when the recovery is presented to a person who's just checked in, the first thing is profound skepticism. This has not worked. This has never worked. I've always left recovery. What makes this different from any other time? Now, part of it is doubting the system. You can't affect me. You can't fix me. Of course, as self-doubt, which means I can never be changed. When as you beautifully pointed out, when Moses said, "What happened to you?" And Aaron says, "These people are bent on evil." So the person arrives in recovery and says, "You don't know my secret. I'm bent on evil. I'm irredeemable. Nothing good can happen with me. I'm going to relapse. I'm going to run out of this place, and you will have wasted your time. My family will have wasted their money. It's all going to happen open again." And part of what the clients try to do is demoralize us. And my response, as I think about it, is to come back with Bezalel, which is, I see something in you that you can't yet see. I see Bezalel. Yeah, you see the people with the molten calf. That's very clear. You've been doing that your whole life. But I see Bezalel, and some part of me believes if I can get them to see what I see, then the path of recovery will come. And I think that's part of our core missions as human beings, and the intersubjectivity where we mirror ourselves to each other. We have to mirror to the other that we can see the Bezalel in them. We can see the image of God in them. We can see people endowed with wisdom and discernment and understanding. People who are able to create beauty and to create goodness, because people can't see it in themselves. Sometimes it takes the other person to say, "Here's what I see in you. Trust me, I see this." And I remember so many times in recovery, they would challenge me to, how do you see this in me? What do you see in me? I can't even see it in myself. And when I look at Moshe, I don't like Moshe here, because Moshe sounds like the angry parent. What? You messed up again? You didn't do what I told you to do? You're a rotten person. And I look at Moshe and I say, I've seen guys like you destroy one kid after another. Would you please find some common sense and not ruin your kid? So it's as if Moshe and God are in collusion. Let's just destroy these people, kick them out of the house, exile them, banish them, disinherit them. Something happens to Moshe. It's like something happens to that, not usually both, but one parent in recovery says, whoa, wait a minute. First of all, I'm going to forgive my kid. I'm going to forgive my kid. Right? When Aaron said, look, these people are bent on evil, the kid did not choose to be that way. Nobody chooses to be an addict. They wake up and they're an addict. And I see this, the Moshe saying to God, and again, I don't have a perfect analogy set up, that God is, as it were, culture, society, everybody. You are damaged goods. I just want to get rid of you, which how many people treat their addicted children. And Moshe says, I see your worth. I see your worth here. You have to forgive them. Don't forgive them for what they did. That's part of it. Forgive them so that they can become who they shall become. So in many ways, forgiveness is not past directed, it's future directed. And last thing I'll say is same as self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness isn't, I forgive myself for what I've done, because some of us have done things, we carry guilt and shame, and we say, how can I ever forgive myself for what I have done? Well, what you say is, the rest of my life, I will make good on that. I will show that I have been worthy of forgiving myself and propelling myself into the future, which is a way of bringing God's forgiveness and goodness down. So I want to thank you, Sherry. You did a beautiful, beautiful job here. And of course, as always, your teaching inspires in me thoughts that I hadn't thought before about this parsha until I listened to you. And it's great that we all have this effect on each other, where we see things because of able teachers who bring out things that we would not have seen without them. So that's